listening to another episode of the Safe Hire 360 podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Millán, founder of Safe Hire 360. Today's episode is an important one, especially for anyone working in healthcare. Joining me today is Jeff DiLavori, a veteran ER and trauma nurse with over 20 years of frontline experience in level 1 and level 2 trauma centers. Jeff has seen firsthand the realities of workplace violence in healthcare and the gaps that continue to put workers at risk. Jeff, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
So much for having me. It really is. It's a pleasure and also a privilege to be having this conversation with you today.
Great. So for those of our viewers and listeners that don't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about your background and trauma and the ER and all your experience you've had over the years?
Sure. My life in emergency medicine started when I was 18 years old as an EMT in my volunteer fire department on Long Island. After a couple of years, I became a paramedic, and I was a firefighter for almost 13 years until I got married and decided to raise a family. During that time, I earned my associate's degree in nursing at Nassau Community College on Long Island, and I started working in hospitals. My first job was a level 2 trauma center that was close to my home. It's actually the hospital I was born in. The first almost 5 years of my career, that really shaped who I became and what I wanted to become in the world of emergency medicine. We saw a lot of wild stuff back then in the late 90s, early 2000s. We moved, and I went to another level 2 trauma center. I worked just in so many different hospitals, full time per diem, in Nassau County, Suffolk County, Queens, and in Brooklyn, when I lived in New York, up until I moved here in 2022.
Okay, here
And
being
went to
South
work.
Florida.
South Florida, yes, beautiful South Florida, paradise, yes.
For
I moved
people that
here at
don't know who we
20.
are or where we're located, so here might be anywhere, but here we are talking about South Florida.
Hey, thank you for the prompt on that one. I'm sorry. But yes, I moved to South Florida, and I worked at a level 1 trauma center, actually 2 level 1 trauma centers in Palm Beach County, where I was the trauma injury prevention and outreach coordinator for a fairly large health system in our area. I did that for almost 3 years until I decided I wanted to move back into the clinical area. And now I'm currently working at a non-trauma center, also in South Florida, in the emergency department as a registered nurse. So that sums up my career pretty in a nutshell. I love what I do. I always have. I love helping people. Nothing gives me more joy in my life than being able to help people in their time of need. But that doesn't come without some stress.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great career field, and I'm sure you've seen a lot. So today we're talking about workplace violence in healthcare. And just recently, I'm talking within the last week or so, there's been a few incidents that I'm aware of. We had an incident in Orlando where a therapist was stabbed to death by one of her former clients. Very unfortunate incident. There was another one that also happened. Well, this one is actually in Bradenton, Florida. And this particular case was a domestic violence spillover where this man came into the lab and shot and killed his ex-girlfriend and the woman that was working with her because she just so happened to be a witness. So these things do happen quite frequently. And, I'm trying to spread awareness. You're here with me today trying to spread awareness. So tell me, when you think about workplace violence in healthcare, what exactly does that mean to you?
Well, healthcare violence is a pretty generic or general term. There are lots of different forms of violence or potential violence that take place, especially in the emergency department setting where I've worked for my almost my entire career. In today's world, I don't have to tell you, there's quite a bit of elevated emotions with a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, whether it's politics, economics, race, etc. So people are definitely in a heightened state of anxiety, if you want to call it that. Now, couple that with the fact they're coming in to an emergency department because they have an illness or an injury that adds even more stress to the situation. What happens is, it's a powder keg sometimes. As a healthcare professional, there's several things that I've learned and I've now passed forward to the younger generation. We're professionals, and there's a reason why they call us professionals. You have to act like you've done this before. You can't get upset or angry or dismissive of somebody who is on the edge of kind of control. In that case, you really have to be even more calm. You have to be able to de-escalate situations before they become a problem. And some of the best people I know were able to do that. They almost made it look easy the way they did it, without having to have any type of physical interaction or altercation or security or anything like that. So you can't wing it. It's definitely there is training. Over the years, I've taken several courses through hospitals that I work for. One of them was called Right Response. There's another one down here that I took. I can't recall the name of it now, but these are courses that teach you how to identify potentially dangerous situations and how to de-escalate. First, you start with verbal de-escalation. Then you could start with kind of like physical de-escalation by body positioning, body posture, things like that. And then finally, the last resort is when you have to resort to like physical restraint with someone. But it also teaches you like basic self-defense. And I'm not talking like martial arts. I'm talking about how to keep yourself safe if somebody should approach and come at you with the intent to harm
Yeah, that's really important. That's what we do at Safe Hire 360. So we do have programs that teach de-escalation, and so they had no de-escalation training. They had no policies that they were aware of, or maybe it was there but they were never informed of it. So do you see that a lot in healthcare where it's kind of like, nobody really knows what's going on?
What I see in healthcare today is everything revolves around the almighty dollar. There's the money, and then there are the requirements, or the other word I can't think of is whatever we're required to learn. As long as we are meeting our classes where we're able to sign off that we attended a 5-minute lecture. It satisfies their requirements with hospital inspectors and all that. When it comes to safety of the employees, I think the almighty dollar comes into play because healthcare systems um, focus their expenses elsewhere, into providing patient care, maybe a new equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that safety and security is pretty far down on the pyramid for that. Chris, I believe the average person doesn't understand, and it's not their fault because they're not in that environment. But I don't think they really understand how dangerous our healthcare facilities have become in terms of violence or potential violence.
Right.
We see it every day, especially in the high acuity areas like the emergency department, the intensive care units where loved ones might be, near death, and the family is very emotional, and there can be conflicts that develop as a result of maybe they feel like that their loved one's not getting the best care, or they're being asked to leave the room or something. Tensions escalate very, very quickly. And again, I'll circle back to our initial statement. De-escalation is the key when this begins to happen.
Right. So I was just going to ask you, so in the ER, what is the most common types of incidents that you actually come across?
I mean, the most common are the verbal aggression. I think, where I work now is I would call it a safe ER. We have people that come in that can get aggressive verbally. They start with passive aggressive remarks. If you see people start to escalate, they may start pacing. They may start trying to recruit other people in the waiting room or other patients' families to kind of like, hey, do you see what's going on here? What do you think? And that's the kind of aggression really that we see, that I'm seeing now. But in the past, I've seen quite a bit more.
Do you have any real life examples of things that you witnessed? I mean, you don't have to get into complete details, but any kind of experiences that you can share with us?
Certainly, I'll go back to my first job at the first trauma center I worked at. We had a great crew. We were all young, fairly new, and moderately experienced ER nurses, and we worked the night shift. One particular night, a good friend of mine, Dawn, 6 months pregnant, we get a violent overdose, whatever she was on, some type of psychedelic or PCP, whatever. When you have people that are under the influence of the drug like that, they become almost superhuman in their strength, and they have a complete disregard for everyone's safety, including their own. They have a reduced sense of pain, so, they don't feel anything. So they'll do things that, if they were sober, they probably would stop because they're hurting themselves. So This particular night, we're trying to restrain her. There's about six of us trying to get her into physical restraints. And one of the staff who lost focus for a second, let go of the leg. And this woman kicked my coworker right in the face. 6 months pregnant, kicked her in the face, almost broke her nose, bleeding all over the place. She's on the floor. And after that, it was just, we were all stunned to have seen that. Thank God she wasn't seriously injured and the baby wasn't. But that's one instance. Another instance was another hospital I worked at on Long Island. It was a suburban hospital in a lower socioeconomic area. And we had some what we call frequent flyers. These were people that were repeat patients in the ER, known to us, drug abusers, criminals, you name it. We had the bottom of the barrel. And my friend Vin, also on our end, was trying to de-escalate the situation with this guy, and he made the mistake of he turned away from him for a second, and the guy cold cocked him, punched him right in the face, almost broke his jaw. I don't know if he broke his nose, but he almost broke his jaw. And when we saw him the next day, his eye was closed. I mean, he was all black and blue and everything else. And but it was a pretty significant injury. And what happened with that, Vin wanted to press charges, and the hospital administrators came down on him so hard to not do it, but he still went against them. And unfortunately, the police dropped the ball, let this guy get away, and he disappeared. So we never saw him again.
That was another question I had for you. Whenever you guys do experience a situation like this and you go to your HR or your managers, how is that taken? Is it something where they kind of just brush it aside and not really want to deal with it? Or do you feel confident going to your superiors?
Well, where I am now, I'm at the bottom of the totem pole. I'm just a regular staff nurse. Our immediate supervisors understand what we deal with every day, our assistant nurse managers and our director. But when you get into the C-suite and the front office and the administrators, they have no clue, not a clue. They're probably the most well protected in any healthcare facility. They're behind double and triple locked doors that you need security badges to get into, and usually security is pretty close to where their offices are located. So when you're protected like that, and when you're not in the trenches and seeing what's going on for real, um, you know, I don't think a lot of them take it seriously, or a lot of them understand the dangers that we face. Now, are they receptive to feedback? Of course they are. And you'll get lip service and, hey, we're going to make some changes and we're going to add security, etc. Currently, where I am now, we added metal detectors that everyone has to pass through before they enter the emergency department. And our security guards are licensed to carry firearms. So, for me, that is a huge relief that at least we're doing that. We're screening people for coming in, not just for firearms, but knives, mace, any type of weapon. You were in law enforcement, people can carry things on them, in strangest places. So
Yep.
it's nice to know we're at least screening them now.
I agree with you. We have to have some kind of layer of protection for people that might want to bring weapons in. But like I always tell people, you're your own first responder. So even when you have all these security measures in place, let's say you have good security systems, you have this, weapons detection systems, whatever it is, you still have to be prepared yourself because security cannot get to you in time. So when we talk about de-escalation, we also have to incorporate some kind of a self-defense into this whole mix because if somebody grabs a hold of you, they don't have a weapon, let's say, but they grab a hold of your neck and go to strangle you or hit you or something, you've got to know how to handle that situation. No matter what the security level is, we need to have our own level of security as well, not just rely on the organization for self-protection because it's not always going to be there in time.
Absolutely agree with that statement. There's two things I'll say about that. As a man working in what used to be a predominantly female environment, oftentimes they return to me or other men that I work with to be almost like the guardian, the protector, or if things were starting to escalate, like we would intervene. And this is not a statement to be offensive to anyone, but for the most part, I'm a fairly big guy. I'm about 5'8", weigh over 200 pounds. Some of the women I work with are 5'2" and weigh about 100 pounds, 110. So if you get a guy like me going after someone like that, it's a pretty unfair fight, if you ask me. So you do need some people with size and with some ability to at least try to, I don't want to use the word de-escalate, I want to say to try to diffuse a bad situation.
Yeah, that was that story that you and I spoke about a little while ago that happened, I believe, at St. Mary's, where one of the healthcare workers was attacked and beaten so badly. I think he broke most of the bones in her face. And
Mhm.
it's just really tragic. And I just didn't understand why they would have a particular individual in the same room as somebody that was capable of doing that, and nothing was done. And I know her daughter had made a statement that she didn't even have any kind of de-escalation training. I don't know how they can allow an individual to be in a room with a woman like that. And I believe it was an elderly woman too, so that's even worse.
Yeah, she was beaten pretty bad. If I'm not mistaken, my recollection is that she was in a medically induced coma for quite some time. She required multiple surgeries to basically reconstruct her face, and it was an absolute it was horrific. And again, where we live, South Florida, when you read stories about things that happen in Colorado or Indiana or even in New York, we're like, wow, man, look what's going on there. This happened right in our backyard. And when it happens right in your backyard, it's frightening because now it's real. Now it's, my goodness, I didn't know the person, but it happened at a place where I used to work. And it's not far from where I live.
Yeah, that's the hospital my granddaughter was born at, so it was very close to home when I heard that story. What type of support, if any, was provided to staff after a violent incident?
I can't. How can I put this? Where I work now, like I said, I have not seen uh, many people being aggressive or violent incidents. Okay.
Okay, good.
My experience is from when I worked in New York. Administrators, after something bad happened, usually would come, or we would get a memo, or it would be filtered down through our leadership at the time, and to be told that basically what we did wrong. It always started with the criticism first. If you would have done it this way, perhaps it would have turned out that way. And again, this is being told to us by people who probably have no clue what they're talking about, who never spent a day walking in our shoes, and then reading it out of a textbook or something like that. So, my opinion of most hospital administrators is that of they're not about healthcare, and they're about business. And what they're always looking at is the bottom line. I think bottom line comes first, their jobs come second, and then everybody else comes in.
What kind of incentive is there to even go and let them know what's going on if you don't feel like you're going to be heard anyway, right?
Crystal, it's a public image thing too. Healthcare is very competitive now. Everywhere you go, whether it's South Florida, whether it's New York, whether it's California, it's a very competitive industry. And nobody wants negative publicity. Okay. Nobody wants to hear that, a patient went to ABC hospital and was assaulted or sat in a waiting room and had to watch somebody get assaulted. It's bad PR. When there's bad PR, you know what happens. People are like, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go somewhere else. So public image is a huge thing for hospitals now. And that's why they will try to internalize or keep internal any and all adverse actions or events that happen.
How do staffing shortages and burnout and leadership culture contribute to risk of violence?
Well, I'm going to answer that in two parts. You said first it was lack of staffing. Well,
Yeah, the
lack of
staffing
staffing,
shortages.
yeah, lack of staffing. Uh, Down here is not quite as bad as it is where I came from up north. When I was up north, I would take patient assignments of like 13 to 1, 10 to 1. Um, and that was like a usual day. The last place I worked at was a hospital in Flushing, Queens for a very large medical center, New York Presbyterian. And that was probably one of the worst places I ever worked when it came to violence, when it came to aggression, staff assaults, everything else. And the staffing there was absolutely horrendous. I had worked there as a travel nurse on a contract after COVID, and it was terrible. But here, the staffing ratios are much better. Down here in Florida, we're at 4 to 1, possibly 5 to 1 on a busy day, patient to nurse ratio. So it's a bit more manageable. That's the nurses. Now, when it comes to support staff, that's a different story. Your techs, your medics, your ancillary staff. That's where we fall short. And again, we'll circle back to the finances. The jobs don't pay very well, and they have a very high demand in the work that you have to perform. Now, I work with some great people. Okay, they're dynamite at what they do. But there's also been a lot of turnover in other ones who just say it's not sustainable. It's not worth what you're paying me for the situations I'm being put in. So that's one part. When it comes to burnout, You're talking to somebody who burned out, and I burned out bad after COVID. It affected me pretty significantly after working it and seeing all the death and the sickness when I lived in New York. So it's a big reason why I left it and moved down here to South Florida to get away from all of that. So we saw a lot of staff burnout after that. I think in the hospital that I worked at the time, within 1 year, it was a 70% turnover rate of the nurses, the RNs that worked during COVID because of burnout. I heard similar numbers here in South Florida, but not 70%. It was, a
Yeah, that's
lot of
very
people
high.
decided to move on. Yeah. But where I was, it was 70%. That's how bad it was. But down here, there was turnover. A lot of the younger nurses who were just getting into the field said, I don't want to do this. And they went and became travel nurses, or they took jobs in other like lower acuity jobs. The older nurses who might have been close to retirement were like, I'm getting too old to do this. I don't want to do it anymore. And they either retired or they took also jobs in other lesser acuity facilities or units to be away from it. So burnout, just like it does with firefighters, with police officers, with paramedics, EMS folks, anybody who works in an environment where you're constantly at a heightened state of awareness for what you do, there's only so long that candle can burn before it burns out. And, it's easy to fall into bad behavior or having emotional problems, depression, PTSD. So, yeah, no, it plays a big, big role.
How is it with the violence against each other, your coworkers? Do you see more of that when they're burned out?
I'll say that, yes, there is. It's not to the extent where you'll see physical altercations, but there'll be a lot of what I call backbiting. Um, you know, this one will be upset with that one, and they'll go to the group and say, "Hey, I don't like what he or she is doing," and it almost creates like an us versus them environment. And sometimes tensions can run high if there are cliques of people that don't get along with one another or don't like one particular individual. But you'll see, usually it's going to be, it's like you're back in high school, everyone's standing in the corner, and they're looking over at the one person and they're talking about them,
Right. Right.
something like that. However, I will say that recently, I did see an incident where there was a coworker who was on the edge. I mean, this person was clearly mentally unstable, and the complaints were mounting against this person over a pretty significant period of time until finally someone mentioned that this person was ready to go postal. And that was taken seriously. And eventually the person left the job. Now, I don't think he was terminated. I think that the person was asked to leave willingly or they would be terminated.
Yeah,
So
basically
even
forcing
there,
them to resign.
yeah, and even there, you know what I'm implying by that. The
Right.
administrators did not want to fire someone because of an incident like that. It would have been terrible PR. And they gave that person the opportunity to go.
Right.
So,
If you could redesign workplace violence prevention in healthcare, what would you prioritize first?
I prioritize having rooms in the emergency department that are dedicated solely and specifically to any potentially violent patient, whether that would be a psych patient, an overdose, a drunk, somebody that is maybe a prior traumatic brain injury, who is maybe not mentally stable because of a physical injury, but it would be a locked unit with at least 3 or 4 beds, depending on your volume that you're seeing. And the rooms should be designed specifically to be safe, not only for the staff, but for the patient as well, so that they don't harm themselves. That would be my
Right.
priority.
Yes, because
I can have 4 rooms as a patient assignment. And in one room, I have a 90-year-old lady that's got a cold. The room right next door could be a Baker Act with a sitter on with a known violent history. And the next one could be someone my age having a heart attack. I mean, they're just put in whatever open room we have. And, what we're tasked to do is make the room safe by removing any and all potential weapons. And that would be, the cords for the EKG monitors, um, you know, uh, any needles, anything that could be used as a weapon. Um, and recently, this is gonna make you laugh. Recently, they told us to stop taking the otoscopes out. Those are the things that doctors look in the ear with, and they're on a like a cable, like a a coiled wire. Okay. And they were like, you can't take them down. They're very expensive and they're getting damaged. So the first thing I said was, first of all, those things are a weapon. And second of all, they could be used by a patient to hang themselves. How can you justify not removing that from the room because of money? And it wasn't met with the most open of arms by certain people. Correct. And because when you're a sitter on a Baker Act, you have to be you're sitting not inside the room, but you have to sit within arm's length of the bed or arm's length of where the patient is. If a patient gets a hold of something like that and they start swinging that around, there's no telling what damage they can do.
Right. What is one action you hope leaders will take away after hearing our conversation?
I would hope that hospital administrators just would be a little bit more proactive in providing safety for the people that come in every day and provide the services to the patients. And that means the nurses, the doctors, the support staff, the transporters, the housekeepers, everyone, be a little bit more proactive. And you know what? Show your face a little bit more on the units that we work in and spend some time with us, shadow us, see what we see every day, and don't hear about it in a meeting when you're sitting down with a bunch of directors who have no direct patient care. I would love it to see like hands-on CEOs, CNOs, chief nursing officers, COOs, the chief operating officers, the ones that control the money, and let them see firsthand what it's like, and then be honest with themselves and say, are we doing enough to protect our people?
I
That's
think
what I
that
would
should
say.
be a requirement. It should be a job requirement when you come into that role, that part of that role is getting out there and sitting with you guys, going through the whole emotions of what you were going through and just live that experience. Because you're right, if they experience it, they might be a little bit more likely to do something to protect you guys.
Absolutely. It's like anything else. If you live in a gated community that's very safe, that has private security, sometimes you're not aware that the neighborhood right down the block from yours has high crime and has a lot of bad things happening
Right.
because, you don't go there. It's close to you. Okay. Not far, but you don't shop there. You don't drive through there and you know to avoid it. Basically, what I just described is the C suite versus the ER.
Right, right. Yeah, definitely. But well, Jeff, it's been so nice having you on the show.
Absolutely. On a positive note, what I would love to pass along, especially to younger people, excuse me, that are entering the field of nursing or being a PA or a doctor, medical field, you know, educate yourself, take the extra classes like what you offer, de-escalation techniques, so like light self-defense, things of that nature. Educate yourself. And then also be aware, always be aware, head on a swivel, and always realize that if you're not watching what's going on around you, you never know when something bad is going to happen. So I love educating the newer and the younger nurses that come in. And share some, see, I'm the old guy now, so I get to share what they call, I guess, wisdom now and experience. But I enjoy it because the last thing I want to see is anyone get hurt.
Agree.
You know what, sadly, you just described a lot of the younger people now, Crystal. I mean, there are nurse educators now that may be 27 years old. Okay. And let me put it in perspective. They may have had 1 or 2 years in the clinical area, but they did a lot of school and they're very smart and they got their master's degree and then they took a job in education, and they know just what the book taught them and maybe a little bit of the clinical area. Whereas someone like myself and others that I've worked with have 20 plus, 25 plus years of experience. And, they're the ones that are supposedly educating us. It's kind of an upside down thing. Gone is the day where you pay your dues and then you become an educator or a boss or something like that. Now all they want to see are the letters after your name. And it's usually master's degree or PhD, APRN, advanced practice, whatever. Um, the grunts like me, and that's what I am, I'm a grunt, and I'm okay with that, are really not the type of people that they want in leadership or education positions.
Oh, that's very unfortunate. Alrighty, Jeff. Well, we're going to wrap things up here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And hopefully, I can have you on again soon and share this podcast with your friends in the healthcare industry so we can continue to spread this awareness and try and prevent this, prevent these incidents from happening to anyone else.
Oh, thank you, Crystal. I appreciate the opportunity, and I apologize. I'm a little long-winded. I can't help it. It's my background being a New Yorker.
Yeah.
But I think the work that you're doing is tremendous, and I'll support you in any way I can, like I have in the past. And it was a real pleasure being here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All righty. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, how can they do so?
They can contact me through my personal email, which is Jedi, like Star Wars, GDI 4100 at gmail.com. And that's my preferred method of contact. I don't usually give out my phone number unless it's someone who I know. But you can always send me an email.
All righty. Thank you so much.